Hi, this is AC Unit, and welcome to Mini-Logue. Today, I'll be painting some Termagants from the Tyranid army. The Termagants are a unit that are the foot soldiers for the Tyranids. They are shooters. They come in with essentially parasitic rifles. These rifles fire living ammo, which burrow into their target and eat their target from the inside out. The Termagants are a part of the Gaunts family of Tyranids, along with Homagants, which are melee Gaunts with claws and barbs, and the Von Ryan's Leapers, which are more stealthy. But today, I also have a special guest for this episode. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Happy. I'm a longtime friend of AC Unit, and I was invited to just talk a bit more about what I think is a hobby and why my definition varies from his. So I'm just here to just skew my stream of consciousness for now.
Perfect. And yes, as Happy said, today's episode will be about what is a hobby. Now, this is a very opinionated topic that a lot of people may have different answers for, but I wanted to kind of understand what a hobby is to different people. Uh, as Happy said, we do have different definitions, but I personally believe that a hobby is something that you're able to do creatively. It's like a creative outlet. It's something where you create or produce something with the skills that you have learned for it. And I believe that a hobby encompasses three distinct categories. A hobby that you can do yourself, a hobby that you can do with friends, and a hobby that forces you into social interactions. And those are sort of my criteria for what I think a hobby is. And now on to Happy. What do you think a hobby is, Happy?
To me, a hobby, well, first off, there's two different words I'm going to use. One of them is going to be a pastime, and the other one's going to be a hobby. So what I refer as a pastime is something that I just do for fun and entertainment. So if it's something like watching movies or reading a book, I wouldn't really consider that a hobby. I consider it a pastime because I'm not really doing something creative or something expressive. It's just me enjoying myself. If I were to sit as for what the hobby would be, I would probably say a hobby is something that is you get out something that you put into it. So a prime example would be something along arts and crafts, for example, painting, writing, or just creating any form of content like Acina does now, or something that can have a impact on others just by finishing a task in said hobby. So that is that's my distinction between the two.
I do agree that a pastime is completely different from a hobby. Both a pastime and a hobby are an activity, but not all activities fall into that definition. For example, you know, when it comes to, let's say you're having an icebreaker and somebody asks you, what are your hobbies? Right? You would say something along the lines of mountain biking, hiking, uh, rock climbing, but I believe that those are not hobbies, more so they are pastimes. They're activities that you do to fill in the time. Your input into those activities does not create an output. Now, I believe that, for example, if you went mountain biking, but you also like to customize your bike often for mountain biking, I believe that that is a hobby. The act of actually going in and changing out your gear. And what do you think about that one, Happy?
In the end, you're still doing something physical and tangible that is affecting how you're going to do the activity. So I would say that is a hobby. Also, I feel like just getting just using something other than your brain for a dopamine rush also is an essential part in what makes a hobby a hobby. Your hobby shouldn't be something that requires you to completely turn your brain off and just enjoy whatever is thrown at you. I feel like a hobby does require some work and effort outside of just having fun in order to grow and develop it.
Oh, okay. So you're saying like a hobby requires it's not just one input, it requires like a couple of different skill sets or knowledges that you both learn about and also acquire as you progress through the hobby.
Yeah, I guess that's also another aspect of it. You should be learning from your hobby, I think.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that one. I agree that a hobby is something where there's no real end goal, but there is a spot where you can feel satisfied with what you have gone through. I think a hobby also is something along the lines of, would you say that creating a collection it would be a hobby?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so that's when I'm starting to draw the line. Like, by making a collection, are you saying you are buying a bunch of figurines and just calling it a day and calling that a hobby? Or are you saying something more along the lines of this Warhammer painting video that you buy the parts, you kind of do a little bit of assembling yourself and paint them yourself into the ideal creative thing you want it to be?
Let's say for now you are collecting for collection, let's say a butterfly collection or a bug collection.
Okay, well, for those, you would actually need to go outside and actively look for those bugs at times, I feel. Like you would need to invest some time and effort into figuring out the environment of these butterflies. But like supposedly you were just some guy that really liked anime figures and you just continuously stock them on a shelf in the middle of your room, just every once in a while you just buy figures from someplace online and you just have them shipped to your house. I don't treat that as a hobby. That's just is you're not really applying anything. You're just kind of spending your money and just getting something out of it, but it's not something you yourself did.
Oh,
So
I see.
even though you did get something physical and tangible out of it, was it through your own efforts? If that's the case, would that really be considered a hobby? In that case, I wouldn't consider it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. It's more of I wouldn't even call it a pastime either. Collecting something like, let's say, Funko Pops, I wouldn't consider that a hobby or pastime because
Yeah,
you essentially you didn't even do more than just essentially swiping your credit card.
yeah. Some people call that bad financial decisions, but
Uh, I agree. I don't agree with Funko Pops. They just do not. They don't speak to me.
average Sea Dog VA viewer be like,
But what about something along the lines of, and this is for the modern generation, collecting plushies or stuffed animals? Would that also fall along the lines of just swiping the credit card?
it really does feel like that. Yeah,
Hmm.
I
But
would say that.
But what if you put in the effort to, let's say you have one month where it's these type of plushies arranged this way, the next month it's these types of plushies instead arranged a different way. Like the act of rearranging. Would that count as a hobby or is that still a pastime?
So you're just saying just the act of trying to acquire those plushies, whether they're rare or not, is that the hobby itself?
No, it's after the acquisition of the plushies is the for example, is the like, for example, the rearrangement or redecoration of of the plushies in different arrangements, would that be a hobby? Like this is after you have swiped your credit card and gotten the plushies.
If that's the case, then your hobby wouldn't really be acquiring plushies or getting plushies, but it would just be decorating with plushies,
Oh,
which I
okay,
feel like would be a hobby.
okay. Because I just thought about that as I said it, and I was thinking it's kind of like flower arrangement, and you can say flower arrangement is a hobby, I think. It's a pretty insane comparison, but flower arrangements and bouquet arrangements, I think,
Yeah,
are
I
a pretty big
was
hobby.
thinking of like purchasing stuffed animals versus like sewing, you know?
Oh, okay. But with sewing,
Like I would
like
treat sewing as a hobby,
sewing
right?
is definitely a hobby. Yes, well, you buy the materials, but you have to learn the different patterns, right? For the most for the most part, it may look simple, but I mean, obviously, we know that it's not. Um, yeah, I think crocheting, knitting, uh, like textile works are a hobby when you're doing it like on a smaller scale. But yeah, but what do you think about the three categories I had kind of made distinct earlier? The hobby you can do alone, the hobby you can do with friends, and the hobby that forces you into social interactions.
Well, before you said that those were like things that you would have to do in order to consider something as a hobby, but those seem like three different categories of hobbies more than
Mm,
anything else.
yeah,
So I don't think it would need to satisfy any one of those threes to be called a hobby. But I agree that if you were to do a hobby, it would fall into one of those three categories.
yeah, that's a better way to put it. Yeah. For
So you
example,
said
oh yeah,
alone with friends, and what was the last one?
so alone with friends and it forces you into social interactions.
Okay, alone with friends, with other people, not necessarily friends.
Yes. So it's like different spheres, different circles of influence, essentially.
Yes, the rings for the rings of influence. This reminded me of a computer science topic called kernel level rings. Hold on, let me find an image.
But I mean, it's the same thing. I think that rings really are like the best way to describe certain things in the world. But I mean, I'm gonna give a good example of it. Let me just check up on that image you sent. This is not going into the video, but I do agree,
It could go.
kernel level.
You just like replace the kernel device driver stuff with just the
The-
alone with friends with people that aren't friends.
and kernel level anti-cheats are the ones that try and sneak in into the kernel. Yeah, yeah. Open up! Open up!
kernel anti cheats literally. Okay, sidetrack, but
No, go for it. Go for it.
yeah, but
We got
yeah,
time.
ring zero would be where the kernel level anti cheat has permission to do stuff in. So
Yeah.
that basically means that anything else that uses the kernel level anti cheat, you can also probably see.
Oh, I see. I see.
So you can even see what you're doing on your hardware.
Ooh, that's very bad.
Yep, that's why a lot of people don't like it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
But yes, back to the topic at hand. I'll give an example of, excuse me, I'll give an example of what I mentioned with the three categories. With Warhammer, actually, very topical. So Warhammer, you can paint alone, of course. That's the hobby alone. You can talk about it with friends. You can, paint with friends, play games with friends. That's the hobby with friends. And you can also go out to a shop or a community to play games there or talk about Warhammer stuff there. That's the forcing you into social interactions. Like if you go to a tournament or you just play in like a very, very small game, right? And I wouldn't say that once you become friends with the people that you socially interact with, you gotta find a different hobby. Warhammer doesn't count anymore, but it's more so having to be in having to be in a social setting and being forced to interact socially more so um, is what that category mainly entails.
in the
Uh,
example you've got to be going to a mall kind of thing, though. I wouldn't necessarily consider that a hobby either. That is still more of a pastime. But if you were to like, I don't know, go to a book club or something with friends,
ooh,
that
that's
would be
good.
yeah.
I was having a talk with another friend of ours, and they are a big reader. They really enjoy books. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Happy.
Yep.
But I was talking to them about what a hobby is with them, and they also gave me kind of similar answers we're giving. But they also said that would reading books count as a hobby? Then I said, no, that's a pastime, right? I believe you also said that as well. Reading
Yeah.
books is
If
more
you're
of a
just reading
pastime.
alone and it's just a little dopamine thing, is it
Yeah.
really as constructive as you're putting your work as the book is giving you enjoyment, kind of? Is it like, are you putting stuff into the book as the book is putting stuff into you?
Oh, that's a really good way to put it. uh, but I did I did propose this. If you were to read a book and then you wrote a book review, whether you wrote it only for your own eyes or to tell other people or tell your friends, right? That is a hobby because you that's a hobby you can do alone. And if you go to a book club, right, where you then have to also provide your book review with the book club members, that's a hobby with social interaction. I wouldn't say it's a hobby with friends necessarily. It's more so like a hobby with social interactions. But your friends, you can still be friends with the book club members, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's constructive because, and it has an impact on other people. So that I would consider something of a hobby.
Yes. Now here is an interesting one. Would playing video games count as a hobby, or is it a pastime?
I would consider it a pastime
Hmm. Would
because
Oh yes, go for it.
it's just funny little dopamine goes
Uh,
up. I don't really see how constructive you can get, and I know a couple of people that have taken their love for video games to be constructive, and they're more of like game devs now. But
yes.
like
For
me personally, when I play video games, I always feel unproductive and that I'm not doing work,
hmm
which is just like one other point. But the other thing is that I feel like if I was doing a hobby and I was constructive, then I wouldn't be so troubled by this.
I see, I see. So playing video games, I agree, is more of a pastime. I'm getting something. I don't feel like I'm getting something out of it, as for example, a live service game with a rank system. Once that game closes up, that rank means nothing. That history means nothing, right? And and for something like a game, even something like Minecraft, some people consider a hobby because you create stuff in it. I do agree that there are cases where you do create something and produce something in Minecraft, but I, I would still say that that's still a pastime.
I mean, I know some people that have also taken the video game thing variation to be a bit more dopamine focused, but still being a hobby, and that is becoming streamers, right?
Mm, yes,
That I think is the application of making a pastime a hobby.
yes. So a pastime is more like a step below a hobby.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. So activity is the big all-encompassing circle, but then it goes pastime, then hobby. Hobby is like the extra
Yes.
effort.
Bring up the ring again.
Back to the rink. I'm gonna flash it into this video right
You
here,
better
right
put
now.
that in.
Oh, I'm gonna put that in. Yes.
Warning. Just
Yeah. Warning, I've now invaded your kernel.
but yeah, like me personally, I've been one thing I realized about myself is I am very volatile in my hobbies. I just
Oh, okay.
get random shit and I want to be constructive in it. Like right now, I'm kind of just interested in trying to do stitches.
Stitches.
Yeah, just for no particular reason. So I was just like, oh, I wonder if there's any of those training stuff that doctors and nurses use for
Oh.
practicing. Just
Hmm.
like, oh, I can just use this.
Well, if I have a laceration, I know who to go to.
You, not me. I am not a licensed medical professional. Please do not trust me.
In a survival situation, I would probably trust you. It's like crocheting, right?
Although I was informed that staples are now the, as the gamers say it, the meta.
Yes, yes, medical staples are the new. I wouldn't say it's the new big thing, but more so, it's the more commonplace thing nowadays. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing,
A
right?
a
Advancements
couple
in
of my nurse friends are
technology.
just like, yeah, staples are the main thing now.
I can only imagine
I
what. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I got freaking sent somebody using zip ties.
Ooh, I can't imagine the pain of the zip ties. Right. But I can imagine certain stitches that used to be like near impossible getting a bit easier with staples. Of course, I also think in some cases they would use like a combination of staples and stitches. But
I've again not medically licensed,
not medically licensed,
so like, I don't want
but
to say anything. I don't. This is like the disclaimer, not financial advice.
yeah, a lot of people have to say that nowadays. A lot of disclaimers. But I think to a hobby, right, why some people might feel burnt out, like asking, I'm doing the things that I enjoy, but I'm not feeling anything from it. Why? Why? And they ask themselves, why am I not feeling the same feeling that I would normally get from doing this thing? And I think it's because what they're doing is a pastime, but not a hobby, right? A hobby uh, induces more creativity. You have to use your creative side of your brain, but a pastime, you can do a pastime very passively. Is that
Yeah,
so?
that's another thing. There's like
Yes.
a difference between like passive and active enjoyment. I feel like most
Oh.
hobbies are active enjoyment.
Oh, I see. It's because of the extra effort you have to put in for the hobby. Because producing something is very difficult, especially if you don't have prior knowledge to it, or you get scared of actually starting. Right? I know for a fact there are a couple hobbies that I've now picked up that when I was younger, I was very scared of starting. I always thought, well, I might not enjoy this, I might not like it, and please excuse me for a single second. Continuing on, we were
It was just
talking.
the passive and active stuff I remember, and then I forgot there was like a couple ones said after that.
Okay, I guess we can just go back to the passive and active. So I had to cut a bit of the dialogue there, but I believe we were talking about passive and active enjoyment.
Yeah, like there's the rings, the activity, then there's the passive, and then there's the hop.
Yes, I agree. I agree that passive enjoyment versus active enjoyment, it's excuse me again, I'm a little under the weather, but passive enjoyment is more like you're able to just do it, and then you might enjoy it, especially when you first started, you might enjoy it, but when you actually get into it, you might want there to be something more, and that's where active enjoyment comes in. It's where you add this extra something. We see this in, for example, playing video games. Very famously, the game series Dark Souls, known for being very difficult. People eventually get so good at it that it's just an average day for them whenever they play the game. So they have to add more challenges. Not getting hit a single time, not dying a single time, no dodging, and so on. So I think that ends up becoming a hobby when you start adding more to your pastime.
Uh, I don't. I feel like the line kind of differs
Hmm, I see.
because again, mine is the constructive aspect of it, right?
Yes.
but others may have it shifted differently. Mine means
Oh,
just like, so you said what was the difference in activity and pastime?
hobby and pastime.
Separate hobby and pastime? Yeah, it would be the construction. As for the
Okay.
difference between an activity and a pastime, that I do not know actually.
So it's more like
Would it's just enjoyment?
the production, the act of producing something is more what a hobby is, kind of. When it comes to what a hobby is, it may the separation between obviously if you're asked what your hobbies are, you can say whatever you want. But I feel like when it comes to getting burned out of things, not feeling the same feeling you used to feel when you did something a long time ago, that might have been a pastime instead of a hobby, and that could contribute to burnout. But I also believe that there's always talk of I'm burned out of my hobby, which is true, because I think if you do something for too much and expect this and you keep expecting that you'll feel the same way, um, you're not going to enjoy it as much. I think you build a tolerance to it.
Yeah, work does just make things not as fun. But at the same time, just doing something enough times also just doesn't make it as fun. I just feel like putting effort into something makes makes it feel like more time has passed for it, and people eventually get bored of it. And I feel like with hobbies, it's much easier to burn out for a hobby than it is a pastime, which is why there are a lot more people that prefer pastimes than hobbies.
I see. Is it also, excuse me again, like kind of an expectation that the hobby will make you feel the same way as you used to? This weird expectation where, oh, I'm burned out right now from other things. Let me just do this thing that I know I enjoyed. But then you start doing it, and you don't, nothing feels like it changed. You still feel kind of burned out in general, even though, and then that might lead you to say, oh, this hobby is not making me feel the same way that it's supposed to make me feel, like you're expecting that, and you don't continue that hobby anymore. What do you think about that? That was a big complicated of how I kind of expressed it.
I mean, yeah, it kind of just feel like it reflects what I've said. It's you get tired the more work you get put you get tired the more work you put into something, and
Ah,
work is just defined by how much effort you put into it and how much results you get out of it.
I see. That's a good way to
So it's
put
much
it.
easier for somebody to put like a bunch of effort into something and get no success than they worked and they got nothing out of it, which is burnout. They can work very little and get nothing out of it, and that approach is very close to a pastime. And then you got to find a little sweet spot where you work and you get the appropriate results so you feel like you're actually growing. And that's why people stay. It's actually a very common technique used for people to study. It's called, I think, the flow state or locus state.
Locust state, the flow of state, kind of like going in and out and in and out of the kind of like cycling how you approach your hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is why I know a bunch of people that do try to approach hobbies try not to make it a working hobby, like excessively working, right? Like they understand to take breaks to make sure that they don't die.
of course. And and when you make your hobby a form of work or a chore, obviously you're not going to enjoy it anymore because now it's not you want to do it, it's you're forcing yourself to do it. And I think that that is what ends up killing a lot of motivation for a hobby. I think that a hobby is something that you can do, leave for however long, and come back and still be able to perform the actions again.
I'm just trying to think of. Should I lost my train of thought? Brain no worky. Ah,
It's that hobby burnout. It's coming for you. That's what this is. But I can continue from there. Having a hobby is more than just, doing the activity. Like I said, you need a hobby that puts you in social interactions. You need to be able to still go outside and talk to people. Because not only are you inputting something into your hobby to learn, you also need to see different perspectives on how to approach things. I know, for example, I've met a couple people at a Warhammer shop, and they tell me, oh, use these paints for this, or oh, if you just dry brush it, it looks better, or if you glaze it instead, it would get this effect, or if you do metal and then a ink over the metal, you get a nice colored metallic. So it's not just about learning on your own, it's also about learning from a bunch of different places and a bunch of different sources. I think a hobby, generally, your hobby alone may evolve into a more social hobby. We see this with um, creators on Twitter, for example, artists on Twitter. They start off, they have 14 followers, but over time, they start getting more followers. Different accounts see them, provide input, maybe some critique, and then their art evolves, and their hobby goes from a hobby goes from going alone to now it's a hobby with a social interaction. I wouldn't say social media itself is a good, excuse me, is a good replacement for more public spaces, like going outside of your home. But I would say it's a good start.
I think it is also a good start.
hmm Being able to take critiques from different places and understanding it, of course, advice and suggestions and critiques do not have to always be taken when you're given them. You can put them under consideration, and if what those pieces of advice and suggestions say end up applying more to what you're doing, of course you can take it. But as long as you're able to input something and also get a different output, that's that's what it seems like a hobby kind of is. So,
In the end, it all comes down to scope and result.
to scope and result. Oh, that's a good one. But I would say something along the lines of, so I have another hobby, Magic the Gathering. I'm a big Magic the Gathering guy. I don't got a big collection. I don't really buy single cards. I generally buy the pre-constructed decks because I don't have time to sift through the huge library of cards and create a deck out of it. But Magic can be played in a multitude of different ways. There's the online version with Magic the Gathering Online and Magic the Gathering Arena. I would say that's more of a pastime because that's a video game. Excuse me. But going out to a game store, a local game store that has events for trading card games like Magic, that fulfills the hobby in social interactions. You have to go outside, you have to interact with people you normally don't interact with, and you gotta be verbal with your opponent. You can't just be passive be and say I played this and then this and then this and I attacked this. No, you gotta talk. You gotta say you ask questions. What does that card do? Oh, I didn't know that happened like that, and stuff like that. That's the social interactions that you can't really get when you're always online.
That hit a bit close to home considering I'm always terminally online.
No, you gotta go outside. You gotta talk to people. uh, but being able to have hobbies, and of course, hobbies can encompass any amount of those categories. They like with Warhammer, like I said, it can be all three, it can be two, it can be one, it can be a mishmash. But I think in in order to not only grow your knowledge in your hobby, but also kind of grow as a person, you do need these categories of a hobby because you need to be able to know how to do stuff on your own. You need something to keep you occupied when it's just yourself. You need something that you can talk with your friends. I feel like games are a pastime, but I think when we talk about it, that's also a pastime. Well, who am I kidding? But when we're creating like strategies, like oh, we should do this and this instead of this and this, would you consider that a hobby?
Honestly, I think I would. I feel like that's like where the line starts to get drawn between the pastime and the hobby.
Like you're putting
It's
effort.
how much effort do you think is needed, or how
Hmm.
much effort outside of the actual game is needed in order to
Oh.
make it a hobby. I just
Oh.
think making strategies and stuff with friends means that you got to turn your brain on a bit more than usual, and actively interacting with your friends and just socializing that aspect makes it more so of a hobby.
Oh. Yeah. That fulfills the hobby with friends. It's a really
It
interesting
does.
thing. And I feel like a lot of people, when they're bored, we hear, especially in the modern generations coming up, we hear people always on social media, for example, TikTok. I understand that probably by the time this video, excuse me, I'm having a lot of bodily problems today, but especially with something like TikTok, by the time this video is posted, TikTok may or may not have been banned, but you hear these stories of people on TikTok and they're just spending their entire weekends just scrolling on TikTok. They go up, they eat some food, they go back down, and then they scroll TikTok again and again and again. And I think and some people say that that's a hobby and say that their hobby is going on TikTok. Unless they're like joking, I feel like some people are pretty serious about that. They say that, yeah, my hobby is this, and I don't have any other hobbies. I think that that's just more of a pastime.
And my roommate just messaged me saying he had the nicest poop of his life.
Healthy body, healthy mind. But I do feel like having some sort of distinction between what is a pastime and what is a hobby might help in understanding why you may be bored and might maybe be bored with something or anything, honestly. Some people I've heard some people outside of our friend group, right? People that I've met, and they go, yeah, I'm just bored. I don't really do anything. I mainly go on my phone on weekends. I scroll to TikTok, but I'm just bored. And I'm always thinking, well, if you're bored, then you gotta find something. So, I try and suggest, what about this and this? And they tell me, oh, I don't know, that's a lot of work. But I think that extra work, once you start doing it, kind
That's what
of,
makes it worthwhile.
yeah, it makes it worthwhile. You're right.
In the wise words of the little picture that my coworker put on my desk, suffering builds character.
Correct. Yes. Suffering
I
builds
showed them that
character.
meme and they 3D printed and just slapped it on my desk.
Suffering builds character. Suffering builds character. Suffering builds character, and it does. For example, I mean, I'm gonna use a very wild metaphor here. A block of marble will always stay a block of marble, right? But by inducing stresses, by chipping away at it, the marble itself suffers because you're breaking it. But at the end, when you're all done, you have a sculpture, and that's character. I think that to suffer means to be put in a situation where you have to understand what it is that makes you suffer, what it is that makes you feel this way. and some people don't put it, and some people may not want to put in that extra work.
To suffer is to be human.
Yes.
But now we're getting a bit sidetracked on this.
But
So
now, yes. But in
I feel
hobbies,
like we answered all the major questions.
yeah, yeah, I think that's the major questions. We do have some extra time, so we'll try and fill it in with some things like, in a hobby, you start off, you're excited, you're confident, you're like, let me do it. I made the purchase. Let's say for Warhammer, right? You made the purchase, right? You did the little paint demo at the Warhammer shop. You got that Marine or Stormcast Eternal, and you're excited. You're now feeling, yes, I have my paints, I have my colors, I know what I want to do, I have my models, and then you actually get to doing it, right? The thing about Warhammer, at least for what I have experienced painting and putting together models, I hate assembling. I hate putting the models together because I want to get to the point where I'm painting. I want to get to the point where I'm producing color. But assembly is annoying because for Warhammer, I know for a fact, um, Warhammer is really bad when it comes to assembly. The pieces are scattered on the sprue, and you have to kind of find them, find the number, cut them, sand off any extra plastic on them, and then you can put them together. For things like Gundam, I know that the parts are very close to each other. The next parts are always right next to each other, and that's good. I wish that that was the case for Warhammer. That is not, so beware when you go into the hobby. But, you're like, okay, let me put in the energy to assemble, right? Then you let it dry so that it can fully meld together, and then you get your painting together. But look at that. You have to know how your paints work, right? You have to put in that effort to understand that not all paints are the same. Uh, Notoriously, reds, yellows, and oranges are the worst paints to work with. I've said that multiple times in Mini-Logue, and I'll say it again. If you like red, orange, or yellow, be prepared to learn. There is a steep learning curve, and because these paints are thin, you don't want to put too much water, but if you don't put enough water or thinner into them, then they don't flow. But something like a blue is very strong, so you want to put slightly more thinner than you normally would. Something like a green is more of a happy in-between, right? You don't have to worry too much, and greens look pretty nice, and they always are pretty safe colors. And that's just my experience with the hobby because beyond putting together models and painting, you actually have to put a bit of learning into your tools. You have to understand your tools. And that's what this hobby really is. Understanding your tools and understanding what you're working with. So if you're afraid of starting, right, and saying, oh, I won't touch red, yellow, or orange. No, no, no. Touch those colors. Because if you don't, you're not going to understand it. Now, I'm not saying go out and buy every single color that a company sells, but more so if those colors are the ones that you want to use, learn, test it. Right? You're not going to get anywhere without a bit of learning. Would you like to add a bit of how you got into Warhammer Happy?
I mean, considering how much you spoke, I feel like most people would just guess it's pretty much you getting me into it. But
I mean, they could have guessed that you were the one who got me into it.
nah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
AC was the one that got me into it. Initially, we were just started off as a pastime. We were kind of just playing Warhammer on Tabletop Simulator, just the game itself.
Hmm.
And then I was convinced that after I played the Eldari, that maybe I should try playing the Tyranids. And coincidentally, the year that I decided to buy my first 1,000 points was the year where
The
the
new
entire
edition.
new, yeah, the new edition was theme was Space Marines versus the Tyranids. So it's just like, oh, sick. So I got that. And now I've left it in the home of my attic, or attic of my home, where I've just consistently constantly been forgetting to bring it out of every time I go visit my parents. But
You gotta
oh,
get it, man. Uh,
my dad keeps on like asking if there's anything, and I always keep on forgetting.
I will remind you, and maybe or maybe not. I don't know. Like I said, it all depends on whether you want to do it or not. I'll never force you. There's no reason to. But, so it's very topical that I did choose the Termagon specifically for this episode. This is episode 5, and I wanted to at least have an episode to celebrate the fact that I have over 10 subscribers. Very small, but very cozy. And I did have this amount before this episode, but I was waiting until episode 5, as it's a multiple of 5, and multiple fives end up feeling a bit more special. But as for Warhammer, for me at least, I got into it via, I think episode 1 goes into it, I got into it via Bricky and Magikarp Muse Fly when they were getting into it during COVID. And I got into the Guard. I like the Army. I like tanks. I like artillery. I like bombarding people. The more guns, the better, is what I like. You would think I'd like Tau for how shooty they are, but I don't like mechs. Just something about it is not fun for me, but I've also, as Happy said, we had the edition box, Leviathan, and I did get the Space Marine side, 1,000 points. I'm working my way through it, and I will keep recording videos, and hopefully I finish that. But when it comes to the Warhammer armies, what was it about Eldar and Tyranid that you liked?
About the Eldar, I kind of just like how people presented the game style of it being very guerrilla based. And then for
Uh,
Tyranids, I kind of just really liked the design, and it really fit my gameplay aesthetic of, hey, I can go horde or I can go specialized, and there's a bunch of like cool big dudes that I can just play in a field, because I really like one-man army characters. And the
ooh,
Tyranids has a surprising amount of creative one-man army characters.
yeah. I think you can, if I remember correctly, you can run the Screamer Killer 3 times because it's not an epic hero.
Yep. I think
That,
I done the Screamer Killer with 2 times, and that was fun. It is a
yeah,
very, very nice unit.
yeah, it's very fun. I am not really a fan of painting the Tyranids, especially after I've done it. I think it's just something to do with just the model. I don't think I gel with Tyranids. I think I'm more of a humanoid sort of painter, but I think I think you'll do pretty well when you are able to paint the Tyranids. How do
Yeah,
you
but
feel
for
after
now,
seeing it?
after seeing like Tyranids stuff,
Yeah,
I just really want to
using
draw big men.
big men. Yes, we love big men. But when it comes to Tyranids, I feel like that they're pretty nice because, well, they are chitin, Chitin, a chitin shell. There is a skin, and there's flesh. And unlike something like human faces, you don't really gotta. You can go any way you want with it. You can't really for human faces. I know human faces are still difficult for me. But when it comes to stuff like Tyranids, let's see here. Have you seen the other models for Tyranids?
I have not.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean by other models? Like,
Well, there weren't any recently released, but more like what is it? The other big models? Yeah, you can see the rules are. I've seen the rules for Tyranids, and they are pretty nice. There is the new detachment that came out that is Run Tyranid Warriors, which are the big four-armed guys.
you guys that follow underneath the wing tyrants? or not the winged tyrant, the anything that's typically around the hive tyrant, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there. But yeah, the Tyranid warriors are funky. They have two separate units. One of them is all melee, and one of them is they have a ranged weapon. It's a mess. I feel like this edition of Warhammer is kind of a mess for what it is. I enjoy it because it's simpler and easier to understand, but I feel like there's some things that kind of rub me the wrong way. Which is why I'm like kind of trying to learn Age of Sigmar, which is a bit simpler. But I do enjoy this hobby. I enjoy the lore. I'm not a reader. I'm not a book reader. I left all that behind when I was a child. I'm no longer reading books, but there
Which is
are,
another issue I'd like to point out nowadays. People are
yeah,
not learning how to read.
yeah,
Please read books, kids.
yeah. Actually, that is a problem that people are highlighting now. Teachers, they're saying the kids are only using speech to text. Have you heard about this?
Not the speech to text thing, but I've heard people have been very scared about their kids' reading abilities.
Yeah, literacy is like the literacy rate is going down. And a lot of people are pointing to kids having easier access to technology that kind of negates literacy rates, kind of lowers it
Yeah, I've heard a
inherently.
lot of shit about ChatGPT and kids and homework.
Oh my goodness, Chat GPT is such a nightmare. I remember there were people uh, when we were going through our education, they were like saying, "Yeah, I'm just gonna toss this into Chat GPT, give me an essay, and I'm gonna just replace some stuff to make it look human." And this was before it got even better. So like, and then I see ads on YouTube of AI homework solvers, and I'm thinking, wow, this is not gonna be good.
And we really went from talking about hobbies to talking about literacy and critical thinking in kids.
Well, you need critical thinking for hobbies, I feel, and you need to be able
And he
to.
brought it right back. He knows.
That's right. I'm really good at making circles. Can't draw them for some reason. My brain can't do that. But yeah, this extra effort that is getting negated, this motivation, intrinsic motivation, is getting negated nowadays because our technology is getting so advanced that why bother putting in the extra work? It's like how the age-old, why do I need to know how to solve this math problem this way if I can just plug it into a calculator? And of course, the answer is you need to know this in the event you either don't have a calculator or you're in a situation where, yeah, you just don't have a calculator.
I don't even care about that part. I just care about, hey, sometimes it can help. There's enough thinking in actually trying to learn the methodology underneath that it helps you a lot more in the future.
That's
You
what
see
I,
that a lot in programming, and you see that a lot in like people trying to learn something. Going with the attitude of why I need to know this instead of how can this help me is going to cause problems because you're not just if you don't care about what your effort can get you.
yeah, that's what I thought too. It's the difference between learning it just because you have to learn it and learning it because you need to know why it is that we do it this way instead of this way. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a math problem and of course I'll be wrong, but I eyeball it and I have a guess in a safe ballpark of where the answer should be versus, another person, they look at the equation and it takes them longer to solve it. It's just the extra effort to that you have to put in. Some people don't understand why that extra effort is even needed in the first place. But yeah. And some people don't even have the motivation to actually want to understand. They just ask, why do I have to do this?
Yeah, and to that, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of people have lost trust in that sense of
Yeah.
like that their work is meaningful, which I guess is also part of the reason why people have a hard time trying to find hobbies because they're scared that their work is going to be meaningless for something that they should actually be enjoying.
Yeah, and it's like I don't I said this problem earlier in the video, but it's like for me at least, there are times where I was scared of starting a hobby because I saw this big mountain that I have to climb, and I have to and you know this mountain, it looks so steep, right? And then I feel like I'm always unprepared when I start to climb it. But when I start climbing it, I realize there are moments where I can take a break from climbing, but I still am climbing that mountain. I think when it comes to actually starting a hobby, the the scary part is always going with the amount of time is always looking back and saying, with the amount of time and effort I put into this, was it worth it? I think that that's a
Sometimes it
valid.
isn't,
Sometimes it isn't. Yeah, I agree with that, but I feel like that's
but
valid.
that's fine. And I feel like I also struggle with that too.
Yes, but that's also a part of a journey. Obviously, don't say, oh, I want to try to learn music and then buy a grand Steinway piano. That's crazy. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, I feel like you shouldn't expect much, but you should still.
Try.
Mhm. But even then, that's just a hard thing to ask of people in general sometimes because
Mhm.
a lot of times we've just been taught to think for ourselves and just do whatever you can get the best result with a minimum effort because otherwise you don't have the bandwidth to deal with other things.
Yeah, I think being able to a hobby is such a hard thing for so many people to find, and a lot of people can spend their entire lives and not even find a hobby that clicks with them, right? I I do know people who are neurodivergent generally have a better time finding or an easier time finding a hobby. It comes with it. Is what I noticed.
Yeah,
But
they literally built alternatively.
yeah.
But at the same time, there are times where they also just struggle
Hmm.
with hobbies as well.
Of course, there's always people who gatekeep and all that stuff, but you know, if you really do enjoy this hobby, a hobby in general, you should enjoy it in your own way. There are ways for you to enjoy it, even if there are people who try and force you to not enjoy it. There are definitely ways. Um, don't do anything illegal, though. That's not a hobby. That's a crime. I don't think that a hobby is something you should force yourself to find. Definitely not. It is something that comes to you when it hits. When you see something or you hear something and you're like, I want to try that, right? And you want to dip your toes into it. But yeah, a lot of people they just struggle. How many times have I found somebody that they don't have a hobby? Uh, Too many. Too many people that I have either met or known that I ask them what do they do in their free time and they tell me something and they don't seem happy when they do it. Or they don't seem excited when they talk about it. And I think around this point of the video, I was trying to do a different method of washing. I tried to dilute some purple paint. It ended up too thick, and I didn't like it. But maybe I'll revisit it. And that's actually a great example right there. I was trying something new to learn, to figure out if it would work. And it ended up not working how I wanted. But now I have a chance to experiment with it the next time I get the chance. There's no end to a hobby. There's always another milestone or marker, right? You can always take breaks. You can always take some time. But at the end of the day, if you do something that's a hobby and you expect there to be an end, I don't think that that's really a healthy mindset. Always thinking that there's going to be an end to it. Do you think that's sort of similar? happy?
I think it's fine to expect something from a hobby, but I don't think you should do a hobby just because you expect to gain something in the end.
Mm,
I feel like a hobby should be primarily meant for enjoyment and
yeah.
enjoying the journey, which
Yes.
is putting in the effort to get what you want. But to get what you want, you will need some expectation. You can't expect to go on a journey without a goal.
Yes. That is completely right. And you're like we said, suffering builds character, and that just means you'll have a lot of points where you are dissatisfied with your work in the hobby, right? Something goes wrong. Like let's say with the mountain biking example, the chain snaps because there's too much tension. Now you're disgruntled, you have to go back, buy a new chain, put it together, and all that. But now you can learn from it. You can see where it snapped, why it snapped, and what happened, and you can make a note of it. You can learn. And every mistake you make in your hobby leads to more successes. More successes. And obviously what you may deem a failure, you can also deem a success. I think the mentality of a hobby is more is less, oh, this was a failure, but more so, this may have been a failure, but I learned something, so you still get something out of it, something positive. And and I
But
think,
yeah,
oh
I
yes,
think that's all. I don't know if I have anything else to talk about with that.
yeah, we answered our question pretty early, and it's just been just chilling and relaxing, having a good time. I'm a bit sick, if my voice didn't give it away, or my coughs or what have you. But you know, there,
I'm a bit sick if you haven't noticed by an overwhelmingly large number of symptoms that I may or may not have to leak throughout the video.
I'm probably not deleting those because those are very close to each other to like actual conversations. So those are staying in for now. But yeah, so thank you once again, Happy, for joining me. I understand this was sometime out of your day.
Happy to be here.
Ah. Well, we have a few minutes left
That was
in
not
the.
intentional. That was not intentional. I did not mean for that to be a pun.
Are you sure about that?
I am 100% sure about that.
Huh, really now?
I'm just on autopilot. It's from the. It's because there's this like. It's like the thing you say on podcasts. There's this
Ah,
podcast that I watch. It's called Marketplace, and when somebody gets off, they're just like happy to be here.
happy to be here. Wait, it's a podcast called Marketplace?
Yeah, it's an economic podcast.
Oh, then you should say like, oh, it was I had a good time shopping here or something like that. It's a marketplace.
Well, it's like it's somewhat formal. Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. That one took a second, but
It took me a bit. It took me a bit.
yeah. Honest, honestly, maybe I should be listening to more economic podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah, you should definitely listen to the Marketplace one. There's tons of episodes, and the guys are very down to earth and chill, and they have people and resources to back it up.
Nice. I like the podcast where I'm not. It doesn't sound like I'm getting talked down to, and and they're not talking down to their guests. Not necessarily, unless it's a comedy podcast, and that's the point.
But you definitely like Marketplace.
Yeah.
It is the main host is a retired Navy veteran who is just a nice dude and wants to help people be more financially aware of the market.
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot of people are not aware of the market. They're not even aware of their own finances.
Yep.
Some people are stuck in credit card debt because they don't understand their credit cards, and some do, and they're still stuck in credit card debt. But yeah, is
Credit
there
card debt insidious.
is there anything more to that you would like to say to round out the video as we talk a bit more?
Nada.
Nada. All right. Well, thank you once again for listening to another episode of Mini-Log. and hopefully I can get some more guests to talk about other things that interest me and our guests. Thank you again, Happy, for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me.